I'd like to read from Affirmations for Self-Healing on the subject of acceptance. One of the most difficult lessons in life to learn is to learn to accept things as they are. How much energy we waste in trying to wish away the inevitable. If only this hadn't happened, if only we had reached there in time. The if-onlys and might-have-beens in life keep us from dealing realistically with what is. Acceptance comes from knowing that reality lies within ourselves and that all else is a dream. Acceptance of that one reality makes everything else acceptable. Instead of learning to come to grips with 1,000 individual challenges, therefore, make the supreme effort to accept God unconditionally into your heart. Accept all that comes in life as coming from His hands. He will give you what is best for you if you live for Him alone. Let us affirm together, I accept with calm impartiality.
I accept with calm impartiality.
Whatever comes my way.
Whatever comes my way.
Free in my heart.
Free in my heart.
I am not conditioned.
I am not conditioned
by any outward circumstance.
by any outward circumstance.
Let us pray. Since thy delusion cauterizing light, shine thy delusion cauterizing light
Shine thy delusion cauterizing light
into the hidden nooks of my heart's feelings,
into the hidden nooks of my heart's feelings.
lest somewhere without my conscious knowledge
Lest somewhere without my conscious knowledge
I have not accepted thee.
I have not accepted thee.
If ever I err,
If ever I err,
strengthen me to accept thy discipline,
strengthen me to accept thy discipline.
for in thy will alone
For in thy will alone
lies the happiness I am seeking.
lies the happiness I am seeking.
Om. Peace. Amen. And let me read also from Paramhansa Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. O Father, thou art just behind my vision with which I see thy beauty without. Thou art just behind my listening power with which I hear thy voice in creation. Thou art just behind my touch with which I feel thy world. In the sweetness of flowers and in the zest of sustaining food lies hidden the essence of thy being, thine eternal awareness, thine eternal sweetness. Thou art just behind the voice of my prayer. Thou art just behind the mind with which I pray. Thou art just behind my glistening feelings. Thou art just behind my thoughts. Thou art just behind my cravings for thee. Thou art just behind my meditations. Thou art just behind the veil of nature's splendors. Thou art just behind the screen of my love. Reveal thyself as thou art behind these mystic screens. Now you've taken my book away. Thank you. I'd like to also read from Rays of the One Light on perfection is self-transcendence. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. We begin this week with a passage from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. If ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the tax collectors the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even pagans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. This teaching is a continuation of last week's lesson. To love all equally is possible only by seeing God everywhere, in others as well as in oneself. See whatever comes to you unasked for as a manifestation of His will. Be grateful for the pains you experience, for they are healing strokes of His love. Sometimes healing is effected only by strong measures, but His love for you is manifested in the very attempt to heal. Strive always to be impersonal, as though whatever happens to you were happening to someone else. Precaution gives us the supreme opportunity to deny the thought, this is happening. Persecution, gives us the supreme opportunity to deny the thought, this is happening to me, and to affirm our inner freedom from the thought of ego. Don't allow the negative perceptions of others to become your own self-definition. Seek God. This is the true goal of life. Though how difficult to cling to in the midst of hatred, spite, and persecution. The Bhagavad Gita tells us in the 7th chapter, out of thousands, one strives for spiritual attainment, and out of many blessed truth seekers who strive assiduously to reach me, one, perhaps, perceives me as I am. O truth seeker, be one among all those thousands who seeks the supreme goal. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. I'm going to warm up. It's not that warm. I don't know what kind of weather you have over here. This saying is one that Master often quoted. What comes of itself, let it come. And of course we are happy to let the good things come. But what he's saying is you don't need advice on accepting the good things. So what the saying particularly refers to is the difficult things. All of us have our tragedies, all of us have our difficulties. We need to learn to take what comes of itself. It doesn't mean that we need to go out seeking it. This is why the practice of extreme austerity, deliberate austerity, is not the one recommended by most masters. I remember I was at the Kumbh Mela in India many years ago. This is a religious fair that they have every few years in certain places in India. And I saw a number of men, a number means maybe 3 or 4, men who never sat down and never lay down and sort of rested on a cross piece of wood that was hanging from a tree. This was their austerity. And looking at them, I thought, that's not doing them any good at all. They looked so gross. Not only were their legs swollen with all the blood going down to them, but their consciousness was downward. There was nothing inspiring about it. And I had a little bit of a critical thought toward them. And then I happened to come upon another in another compound who had never lain down or sat down for 13 years. He had a rope around his chest that he would hang himself from a tree limb, and I would have said yes, the same thing. It seemed fanatical, except that he had a perfectly proportioned body, a radiant face, wonderful smile, full of joy, and I had to say that the criticism belonged to me for criticizing, because he was obviously doing what was right for him. Doesn't mean it would be right for you or me. Buddha himself said it was not the right way. Sri Yukteswar said it was not. We don't need to look for fanatical ways, and yet You can't criticize. There's one story of an American soldier in India during the Second World War, and he saw one of these ascetics who had his arm up like this, and it was all shriveled. And it looks quite unnecessary, is unnecessary. I'm not recommending it at all. What I am recommending is don't criticize. He had his arm like this, and the American soldier mockingly said, "What are you trying to do, old man? You're holding you're praying for God to throw some fruits down into your hands?" And the sadhu said, "Well, why don't you hold your hands up?" So he did, jokingly. He found he couldn't take them down. And he tried and couldn't. And he said, "Please, please help me." And the sadhu said, "Well, you haven't finished." And the soldier said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, pray for fruits." So there this soldier was with his hands up there, feeling like an absolute goof, saying, "Heavenly Father, please send me some fruits." All of a sudden, fruits materialized in his hands, and he was able to take his hands down. Said they were delicious. But you see, we can't criticize. And there's no point, however, usually, in seeking austerities, basically because God sends them to you anyway. We had the question yesterday that is it God's will that hardships come to us, or is it karma? I said it's both, because it depends on how you look at it. A jnani, somebody who seeks God through wisdom and discrimination, will say that it's all karma. A bhakta, a devotee, will say that God sends it. Both are true. Both are equally true, except for one little thing, and that is that when you seek God, He takes a conscious interest in you. And in fact, He does. It's karma anyway. It's not that He's loading you with suffering, but He does, since He sees that you're serious, help you to hasten the thing. Now, yes, you can always make a great case for the divine energy that you put out on the spiritual path attracts more suffering, more tests, more rapid expiation of karma. Sure, that's perfectly true too. But the point is, something's going on beyond your actual will. That something is that when you really give your life to God, partly because you've given your whole life into one thing, so all the obstacles come in that one way. Partly it's that God sees that you're serious and He wants to help you. I personally greatly prefer the devotional approach, because to have a personal relationship with God is so sweet. It's so much more meaningful. I'll tell you a simple little story, and you tell me this was just karma. I'll accept it, but I'll say, yeah, okay, but not for me. When I lived at Mount Washington many years ago, the headquarters of Self-Realization Fellowship, my parents were living in France. Well, you know, I went to school in Switzerland as a boy and learned to love Swiss chocolate. Now, listen, don't give me Swiss chocolate. Every time I tell this story, I get inundated with Swiss chocolate. I'm diabetic, don't give me Swiss. Okay, I kept meaning to write to them, to ask them to send me some Swiss chocolate, and I kept forgetting. It was such a small desire that whenever I wrote, which was not as often as it should have been, I forgot to mention the Swiss chocolate until 1 week before my birthday. I suddenly realized I hadn't, and I thought, gee, Divine Mother, mind you, it's good to share these things with God. I said, Divine Mother, it would have been so nice if they had sent me for my birthday some Swiss chocolate. A very small thought. I just sort of laughed with her and threw it out of my head, out of my mind. Well, you know, the day before my birthday, a member of the church in Hollywood, of which I was the minister, sent me a little package with a little letter saying I was passing by a store and I happened to see these Swiss chocolates. I didn't know they sold them in America. I'd never seen them. I saw these Swiss chocolates in the window and thought of you and felt I wanted you to have them. And so I got them in time for my birthday. Now you tell me that's coincidence. I won't accept it. I'll say you have a right to think as you like, but I will think the way I prefer. Because God, I have seen again and again and again how God just somehow takes you by the hand and gives you, mind you, if it had been a case of my life being in danger, I could accept that God would have to perform a miracle then if he wanted to get a little bit more work out of me in this life. But for such a trivial thing as Swiss chocolate for my birthday, just because I had that little desire, it's much sweeter, isn't it? And you will see that again and again. Master one time was going down to Encinitas, and he used to like to stop by a little store in Laguna Beach. They had Scotch shortbread. Now, don't give me any Scotch shortbread either. They used to have Scotch shortbread, and he enjoyed Scotch shortbread. It's not that he had desires, but you can't live in the body without enjoying things, and so he sometimes stopped there and would get Scotch shortbread. But mind you, he never did anything without God's inner voice. Somehow, there was always a divine flow in whatever he did. And somebody went in to get this shortbread and came back and said the lady's out of it. And Master was not disappointed, but he was surprised. He said, well, Divine Mother, how come? Because he knew that Divine Mother always took care of such little things. So it's not that he was disappointed, but as I said, he was surprised. He said, Divine Mother, how come? Like that. He said he saw this light suddenly come down onto the building, and a moment later, before they could drive out, the owner came running out, wait. She came to the car. She said, I've been saving this Scotch shortbread because it was ordered by somebody, but I want you to have it, and I can make some more for that person. Well, this is the sort of thing that we used to see with him also, and we need to try to learn to live. You see, there are two ways of looking at a master. One is, oh, he did this. Oh, he was so great. How wonderful that God would do this for him. The other is, if that's the way God is with his devotees, then why not take that as an example? And so when we see that God did things for him in that way, why not expect it ourselves? There were so many beautiful stories in his life. One of the ones I've always loved was a man a brother disciple, Devi Mukherjee, was with Master in the car, and Master was driving along a street and suddenly said, stop the car. And they walked back a few store fronts to a little shop that sold knickknacks and basically junk. And he went around in this shop and picked out a few little things that were, Debbie told me, he thought, oh, what does Master want with this junk? And when Master came to the counter and the woman added it up, Master paid her, she burst into tears. She said that I badly needed just this sum of money. The store was about to close, and I didn't know how I would get it. And I had to have it. I think it was for some illness in the family or something. This kind of thing used to happen to him all the time. And wherever he went, he had that kind of relationship which people would have thought it was between him and others, but it was really always between him and God. I'll remember he came home one time, and he'd just been in an umbrella shop. Well, he used to like to collect canes and umbrellas. He used a cane basically. I use a cane sometimes, but with me it's strictly an affectation. With him it was sentiment, and for me it's sentiment too, because in India the Swamis use a danda, which is a pole that reminds them to keep the spine straight. He couldn't go around America with a danda, so he went with a cane. Later in life he needed a cane, but at this time I don't remember whether it was his need or his devotional sentiment. Whatever it was, Master, it was so cute the way he was, because he always wanted to give the example of being responsible, being in the organization. You had to use money responsibly, bargain the man down to the best price he could get on an umbrella or two that he was buying. After gaining all this money by bargaining, he gave the man a great deal more money than he'd saved. And the man said, "You are a gentleman, sir," and he gave him something that was precious to him. And I remember when Master came home and he was saying sadly, "That man had such a poor rug on his floor. I think I'll buy him a new rug." Complete stranger. But he saw everybody as his own. And this was what made him so absolutely adorable wherever he went. He went into some hotel, I forget what city it was, and there was this drunk there who, perhaps in his drunkenness, they say in vino veritas, in wine comes truth. So maybe in that he was able to see something that others couldn't see. But he came up to Master, a complete stranger, and threw his arms around him. He said, "Hello, Jesus Christ." And Master just accepted it. He didn't say, "Oh, don't touch me not," kind of thing. And then he thought, well, he gave him a blessing that made this man feel a great deal of bliss. And the guy says, "Hey, what are you drinking?" Master said, "It has a lot of kick in it." And so the thing is that if we can develop this, and when you see what a master does, don't ever say, "Well, how great he is." Say, "What can I take from that to make my life more like that?" His purpose is not to show you how special he was, but to show you that you have that potential. I'll never forget one time, because Master told me to grow a beard back when nobody but Fidel Castro had a beard. And actually it wasn't even then, I don't think, because I came to him in 48. Anyway, it was an unusual thing. It's because I was so young. He had me lecturing at 22. And most of the people I lectured to were over 40. So a beard gave me, he said, "It gives you character." I said, "It makes me a character." But anyway, there were some people who decided because I had a beard I looked like Jesus Christ. So they wanted me to be part of a tableau in a Masonic initiation of officers or whatever. I'm not a Mason, so I don't know what they do. But I know that I sat there at this rock at Gethsemane, and all I really had to do was sort of heave a great sigh every now and then. No big deal. Anyway, later, and this is the point of my story, later Master told me that the people there said, "You really look like Jesus Christ." And I said, "It'd be a lot nicer to be like him than to look like him." And you'd think that with a sort of an off-the-cuff joke like that, Master would have sort of gone along with the gag and, well, maybe, or something, you know. Instead, very seriously, he said, "That will come." Mind you, that's how he saw every one of us, every one of you. Not what you are today. He always saw us in terms of our divine potential. That will come. Take that as a mantra for yourself. That will come. You can turn anything into a mantra. There's some story of a guru. I don't think he can have been a very great guru, because he bought completely the caste system prejudices. And there was an outcast who wanted to be initiated by him in India. And the guru wouldn't take him. He would only take Brahmins. So the outcast arranged to be, the ghat is a step that goes down to water. And where the guru would go down at 4 a.m. to bathe in the water, the outcast managed to hide himself there in the darkness so that the guru would kick him with his foot or touch him with his foot as he went down. And so as a result, he did kick him. And when he saw who it was, he said, "Get out of here." And this man folded his hands. He said, "Master, thank you. You've given me diksha. You've given me the touch of initiation. and you've given me my mantra, get out of here. And so he kept saying, get out of here, get out of here. Well, this is what we need to practice. Realize that this relationship that you have with God is not something unreal. He's with you constantly, and the more you ask Him, the more you look to Him, the more you find that He really does answer in incredible ways, like that silly little story, but so sweet, about the chocolate, about the Scotch bread. These are tiny things, but God also answers in very big ways. There was one time, one of the monks at Mount Washington, his name was Premamoy. I knew him as Ani Lipovets. He came from Yugoslavia. And he used, as a young man, to do many first ascensions he was an alpinist, used to climb mountains and did many first ascensions in the Alps. And there was one where the mountain was very difficult to climb. Nobody had ever done it. And he studied it, and he thought, well, I could go up. And he reached a ledge almost at the top when all of a sudden he found he was stuck. It was too steep to come down. It was possible to go up, impossible to come down. But the trouble was that the mountain curved outward like that, so that he could not get up without falling down, because it would be upside down. He didn't have any equipment to go upside down. So there was no choice for him, really, except to just lie there and starve to death. Once you got up on top, he could walk down easily, but just to get up to that top. Well, he thought there's no point in just giving up. So he tried, and he'd get up. As soon as his body would be a little upside down, he would fall, fall, fall. 25 times or more, he didn't exactly count. He would fall. But he just decided, I might as well die from bruises as anything else. And all of a sudden, one moment, as he started to get upside down, a force pushed him against the mountain and held him there until he reached the top. There are powers, angels, masters, whatever you want to call them, but they exist. There was a wonderful time also when we were building the church in Hollywood, and Joe Carbone, his name is Brother Ananda now, was taking a hod of mud up to the top of the tower to plaster. And this ladder was steep. And as he got to the top rung with this hod of plaster on his shoulders, he reached for the top rung and missed it. And the weight of this thing was pulling him out, so that he was falling out like this. And he just thought of Master and said, Om, and his body came up like that. And he was able to grasp that top rung and climb to the top. In fact, the man on the construction site, the foreman of that construction site, he said that he was always laughing at us devotees and yogis. It all seemed a bunch of nonsense to him. But he said, I've seen too many things. He said, you people are such babes. You just don't know how to handle work on a construction site. I've seen people drop a board with somebody underneath, and the board was leaning this way in such a way that it would fall on him and hurt him badly. And I've seen that board with my own eyes. Instead of falling the way it ought to fall, come up and fall the opposite direction. He saw this happen so often, he finally decided, this is for me. And I remember the day that it was Christmas time, and he wanted to bring a present to Master. And he brought this present, whatever it was, up the stairs at Mount Washington and left it at outside Master's door, but didn't dare knock or anything, just ran for his life. And then he got to the church and he thought, oh God, I didn't put my name on that package. He won't know who it was. Just then, I remember it, just then the phone rang, and he went and answered it. It was Master thanking him for that present. But the point here is in our own lives that we must always feel that whatever comes is from God. If you take it from God, you will see that it is a blessing, that there isn't anything. Mind you, I've lived long enough to learn a few things, and I've had everybody has his hard knocks, I've had mine too. I can say that when I gave it to God, when I said, thank you, but that didn't always come easily. The thank you didn't come so easily. I remember when I was thrown out of SRF, it seemed to me the most colossal tragedy I could ever have endured. My entire life was that. I didn't have any other desire but to do that. And I've found since then that it was a great blessing. I could never have done the things Master told me to do if I had been there. But it had to happen, but I didn't see it then. And at that time, Ananda Ma, a great woman saint in India, wrote me a letter saying, take this as your Guru's grace. I thought I can take just about any word, but that one word, grace. This did not seem like grace to me. It seemed like the greatest curse imaginable. And yet it turned out to be a grace. Everything that I have accomplished, everything that I've been able to do, Ananda itself, everything has been because of that. I couldn't have done it there. In fact, I never really was an organization man. I was there because that's what seemed to be the thing to be done. But God gave me what I needed, and I'm so grateful for it. Your greatest hardships. There's a story, it's from The Hiding Place. It's by Corrie ten Boom, who was was a Dutch woman. She was Christian, not Jewish, but during the Second World War, she and her sister and her family offered refuge to many Jewish people, sort of a passing through place before they could find the underground connections to take them to freedom. And they were betrayed or discovered in one way or another and finally sent to a concentration camp also. And her sister was a especially saintly woman. She said we must take everything as God's blessing. And Corrie said, well, I can take most things as God's blessings, but even the fleas in this blasted dormitory? And her sister said, yes, even the fleas. And she thought, no, that I can't accept. Well, you know, one time, it was a wonderful experience for her, that one of the guards there was bringing some visiting bigwigs around, and they were going to come into this dormitory where they were holding a prayer meeting. If they'd been found, they'd have been simply executed. But just at the door, the guard said, oh, this dormitory has fleas, let's not go in here. This kind of thing is, I'm pleading with you from my experience, not just some beautiful sentiment. I just know it works. I've never known it to fail. Even the worst things that you could imagine, if you will say, God, thank you. I don't know what you're doing for me. I don't know what I'm thanking you for, but I know something good will come of it. And you'll be amazed to see how, mind you, no life is more important or less important than any other. Every atom is equally important as any other atom. If that's true of atoms, certainly for human beings. Nobody's more important or less important. You are the center, as I was saying yesterday, of your whole universe, of the whole universe. Each one of us, as far as he is concerned, is the center of everything. So try to feel behind every action. There's a beautiful book by Frank Laubach. He was a Christian missionary in the Orient, and he did very fine things with helping them to become literate and so on. I won't go into that aspect of his life. But he also tried what he called an experiment. He said, I don't know whether God is really there listening to me, but I live in a culture where we believe in experimentation. I'm just going to experiment, thinking not of God, not about God, but to God. I'm going to experiment sharing every thought with God. I'm going to experiment sharing every action with God, so that when I walk, I feel you, not he, but you are walking through me, thinking through me. And it was a wonderful book, because it's sort of a diary or letters that he's sending to his father, and describing this ongoing experiment. He found bit by bit that God, he could feel God behind the typewriter that he typed with. He could feel God behind these people who were of another faith than his own, and so on. I had an opportunity to meet him. It was in the, well, two interesting experiences I had with him. Once, it was Sunday morning, and I wanted to play some symphony music, and I turned on the radio, and there was a preacher's voice, and I thought, well, I want some Mozart or Beethoven or something, and I started to turn it when I thought, wait a minute, that sounds like Frank Laubach. Well, I didn't know Frank Laubach from anybody, but it just had that vibration. So I thought, well, let me listen. So I heard it for another 5 minutes, and then it ended, and the announcer said, you've been listening to the Reverend Frank Laubach. And then years later in Sacramento, he was giving a talk, and I came, and he asked each of us to get up and talk about why we had come to the talk and so on. So I said, well, for 18 years I've been longing to meet you, and when I heard that you were here, I came for that reason, because of having read your Letters of a Modern Mystic. And so what could he do but invite me to lunch afterwards? It was a very nice meeting that I had. He said at the time, I'm suffering from an incurable disease, and I looked sympathetically. He said, yes, old age. But he was completely simple, and yet the beautiful thing about his life was that he saw everybody. The Bible tells us to do that, doesn't it? When did I come to you? Through the poor, through the hungry, through the naked, through the needy, through all these people, God comes to you. There's this strong tradition in Christianity that God comes to you through people. He does. Think of everyone who comes as God himself manifesting himself to you. You'll find it's a great adventure. Somebody said to me yesterday in the hotel, you're always smiling. Well, the answer is that life is such an adventure. Why wouldn't you smile? To see God in all these forms, to see how many ways, even, Master, it was so beautiful the way he could be. He talked to somebody who was trying to convert him to a fundamentalist church, and this person just wouldn't buy any kind of explanation. It was just his way and the only way. So Master said, well, don't you think there's some symbolism? No, literally true. Well, what about the Garden of Eden and the serpent? And you hear that the serpent spoke to Eve. In those days, serpents could speak. Master took his hat off. He said, I bow to the colossal temple of ignorance that I behold before me. But mind you, he didn't say that sarcastically. He really meant it. He could appreciate ignorance as much as wisdom. It's all God's show. It's all God's, as he put it once, zoo. And if we can take the experiences of life as what comes of itself, let it come, there is a freedom in that you will see that in the least things, actually, there are great lessons. And death itself has to come. Don't think God has to save you from difficulties. Don't think God has to save you from death, even if that's your time to go. You'll have to go sooner or later. Somebody was trying to tell me that we need to practice techniques that'll help us to live forever, ever. I said, listen, if this were so, and if everybody could live forever, what about some poor young artist starting out in life, and he's saddled with a Michelangelo who's been painting for 500 years? It's not fair. Give everybody a turn. Give them a chance. So anyway, it's easy enough to say, well, what comes of itself, let it come if it's good. But don't think that because you love God, He'll make it easy for you. He will make it easy in the long run. And this is what I have seen, that somehow at the end of every test, there is a colossal blessing. Now that you can't say for worldly people, because their attitude isn't right. They could find it, sure. But when we had that fire at Ananda in 1976, it was a forest fire that destroyed 400 of our 700 acres, 21 of our 22 houses, homes. There's a wonderful story of Asha here, a wonderful slide of her. The next day, with a big smile, getting out and cleaning out all the dead wood so we can build again. We built with joy. We rebuilt everything. We had no insurance. We had no money. It was certainly the sort of thing that anybody in his right mind would have said that, well, there's nothing we can do to regain our losses. Well, the difficulty with us is that we're not in our right mind, so simple. But 10 years later, our neighbors were still grieving over what they had lost. We had lost a lot more. And not only that, but it turned out that the fire was caused by a county vehicle. It had a faulty spark arrestor. Well, what would most people do if they think not in terms of God doing it for you, but bad luck and I'm going to get my own out of it? Most people would have sued. Our neighbors did sue and they collected. We were the biggest losers and we could have collected, well, I would say $2 million. We could have rebuilt everything. I wrote to the county supervisors and I said that I know that you're worrying how we will respond to this thing. I want you to know we're not going to sue. It's not our way to sue. I think suing is a dirty thing to do. I don't approve. Unfortunately, that doesn't spare me from being sued. I say, God, you do as you want. I won't retaliate. I won't get even. I am not interested. And we did not sue the county. We had no money. And yet somehow God helped us to rebuild better than ever. Ananda is a strong place, one of the beacons in this century. And it came from attitude, not from a bank account. You will see that if you live that way, no matter what happens to you, you can lose everything, but you will find in the end that God's sustaining power is there, and He will guide you. He will open the doors. You don't have to make too much of an effort. As Sister Ganamata said, you can only have your own, and your own will surely come to you. This is a truth. It's not a beautiful spiritual sentiment. Now it's freezing cold. I'm going to stop talking and we'll go on with our lecture. Okay.